You're stuck at home in quarantine. 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Hey everybody, it's actually 5:04, having a few little small technology connectivity issues, but hopefully we're good now. Hope everybody had a good Saturday and a good weekend. Thank you for joining me and having a drink with me. Really excited for this evening's cocktail. Weekends are weird in the time of quarantine. You know, the days all kind of blur together. It's nice not to have any clear work that I needed to do, but still strange. We didn't go anywhere or do anything. I think we're gonna try some takeout this evening, but otherwise doing pretty good. And really excited, like I said, for tonight's cocktail, which is the classic cocktail, the Daiquiri. And had a lot of fun the other evening doing a mini private cocktail class with some of my cousins and my sisters. So shout out to all of them. We had Aaron, Colleen, Brendan, Elise, Aileen, Amy, Devin, John, all on the call making cocktails. And when I first pitched to them that we were going to make the Daiquiri, there was a little bit of confusion. Because the Daiquiri often has this reputation as this sugary, slushy drink that comes out of a slushy machine behind the bar at some poolside bar. And there's a time and a place for that, and frozen drinks can certainly be delicious. But the classic Daiquiri that we are talking about today is a much more refined and classy cocktail that really just features three main core ingredients. Which is our rum, limes in the form of lime juice, sugar, and then the fourth secret ingredient is ice or water in the form of dilution. But the Daiquiri has a really interesting history, which I can tell you a little bit about as I start to juice my limes. And the history of the Daiquiri really goes back to 1898. And in 1898, the historians among us will know, we were involved in the Spanish-American War. And one of the main venues of the Spanish-American War and results of it was in the Caribbean and specifically in Cuba. And so 1898 led to Cuban independence, and it also began the era of sort of Americans in Cuba and the close relationship we had with them for decades. And in 1898, Teddy Roosevelt went down to Cuba with his 6,000 Rough Riders. And about 2 miles away from where he landed and where he entered Cuba at that moment, there was a mine. There was a mine there that was being overseen by an American engineer, for this Spanish-American mining company. And he is the one who is actually credited with inventing the Daiquiri. His name was Jennings Stockton Cox. What a name. Jennings Stockton Cox. And there's actually two stories for how he invented it. But it's said that when they were going down there and he was recruiting all the miners to go down there, in addition to just their normal salary that they would compensate the miners for, in order to convince them, they also included in their compensation a monthly ration of Bacardi rum, Cuban rum. It was Bacardi Carta Blanca was the name of it, the type of rum at the time. And it's the Bacardi we know now, although they no longer are operation in the same way in Cuba that they were then. And anyway, it said the two stories of how he invented the Daiquiri. One was that he was just enamored by how all of the locals there would use rum. And there's a specific story of him noticing that they used to mix rum with their evening coffee, which I love, both because I feel like evening coffee is one of my favorite things. We should be drinking coffee all the time. And second is, just about anything can be improved by a little bit of rum. But in any case, inspired by that, it's saying he was starting to experiment and mess around, and he came across the Daiquiri. The other story is that he was out like in the mines showing someone around, and they decided to make a cocktail just with what they had on hand, and it just happened to be these limes and sugar and the rum that they had. That one seems a little bit more apocryphal, but could have happened. And then the third story was that he had some guests over and just ran out of gin. And so instead of making the cocktail with gin, he decided he needed to make add rum in, and came up with the daiquiri. So who knows which of those it was? That'll, I think, be lost to history, but he is credited with it, and it's named after the nearest city to where he was. The name of that city? Daiquiri. So there we go. And even though it was invented by an American, it very much is tied to, Cubans and Cuban bartenders. Think of the daiquiri as a Cuban drink, and it's associated with their identity. And the bartender in Cuba, who is said to really have perfected the drink and its many variations, was this guy, Constante Ribalaigua, at the Floridita bar in Havana, which I'm sure is where Hemingway drank many, many daiquiris, among all their drinks back then. And another night we might make a variation on the daiquiri called the Hemingway daiquiri, which you may have heard of. But so we've got it invented in 1898. It actually took over a decade for it to really, move up to the States and get popular here. The first known experience that we've tracked down is at the Navy Club in Washington, D.C. But in the 1910s, Cuban rum was really the big sensation. Everybody was drinking Cuban rum. Everyone was excited about Cuban rum. Everybody was looking for different ways to experiment with Cuban rums, and they made different drinks. One was called the Jazz, which was this vulgar new music that was just starting to come about in the 1910s into the 20s. Another drink was the September Morn, which was after this somewhat vulgar, not actually, painting with a naked woman. And then, people were looking, how can we use this? And then the daiquiri really took off and became popular. So let's talk about our ingredients today. So we have our lime juice. When I juice these limes, I also just pre-juicing them, some lime wheels that I'm going to use for my garnish. It's going to be quite beautiful. I have my simple syrup. This is a 1-to-1 solution, so I usually do it by the cupful. So I do a cup of just white granulated sugar and 1 cup of water. Heat it up gently, not even to a boil, but just to help it all dissolve, and then let it cool and bottle it, and it'll stay good for a couple of weeks. And then we have our rum. So I mentioned that we want to use a lightly aged rum, so a young rum that'll be more clear, it'll have less color to it. And again, this was originally invented using the rum Bacardi Carta Blanca. The Bacardi that you can just go out and buy at your local packy right now is not the same as that. It'll be much lighter. It just won't be as interesting. It'll be pretty dull and make a dull drink. So the closest we can get to it is this Cuban rum that I'm lucky enough to have a bottle of, Havana Club. Just the 3-year basic drink, and it's apparently a lot of the Havana Club rum is actually produced in the old Bacardi factory where the original Bacardi rum was being made, which I think was pretty cool. And this is a special bottle because you can't get it in the United States. I'm lucky enough to have the most wonderful friend in the world, Tara, who went to Cuba about 1.5 years ago and brought me a bottle of this back. Shout out to Tara. And the funny story about that was that I knew she was in Cuba. I saw some pictures on Instagram. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then she lives in New York, so I didn't see her for a while after that. And about 1.5 months, 2 months later, I was down visiting in New York. And she brings it up and she's like, hey, did you get the rum? And I was like, huh? what rum are you talking about? She said, the rum. I brought you a bottle of rum from Cuba. I was really excited about it. I gave it to Helen last month when I saw her when she was down here. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I did not get any rum. I quickly texted Helen, and Helen's like, oh yeah, it's in my suitcase. So it turns out she just forgot about it in her suitcase. Luckily, rum does not go bad, and I was delighted to get it eventually. And this is just wonderful, wonderful rum and perfect for this drink. If you do not have a friend as delightful and kind as Tara, then a good, or another source of Cuban rums, then a good second best option that I really like stocking is this Flor de Caña rum. This is my go-to cheap but really good lightly aged rum. So I just get the Extra Seco 4-year. This bottle is great and will only be somewhere between $18 and $22 at the liquor store. So if you can find the Flor de Caña, this is my go-to lightly aged rum. Strongly recommend. All right, so let's get to it. So the other great thing about the daiquiri is it has these really simple ingredients, and you can really just dial in the exact flavor profile that you want. Do you want it a little more sour? Do you want it a little bit sweeter? Do you want to really have the rum give it a punch? There is, however, what I consider, and I've heard others consider, to be the perfect daiquiri ratio, which is 8-4-3. 8 parts rum, 4 parts lime juice, 3 parts simple syrup. First came across this in a podcast I listened to called The Speakeasy, hosted by one of my idols, the bartender Damon Bolte, who is the bartender and owner of Grand Army Bar in downtown Brooklyn. He's also a great Instagram follow. But he mentioned this and was talking with some of his insider bartender friends, and I tried it out and I'm like, oh, that's it. So this is the ratio that we're going to be going for. This doesn't mean I'm using 8 ounces of rum. I'm going to use 2 ounces of rum, 1 ounce of lime juice, and 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. And again, the simple is 1-to-1. There are also some, you can get some rich simple syrups that have 2-to-1 ratios and all of that. That's just a 1-to-1 simple syrup. This is the ratio, not the golden ratio, that's something different, but this is the ratio that I like for my daiquiris. So let's mix it up. I'm going to take 2 ounces of this Havana Club rum, and then I'm going to take 1 ounce of my lime juice. And then I'm going to take 3/4 ounces of my simple syrup. And then, as you all know, since I have a fruit juice, this is going to be a shaken, not a stirred drink, to get that really nicely mixed up. And let's shake. All right, so now we're going to strain into a nice coupe glass. And what I like to do, so we have our normal Hawthorne strainer. This is gonna get out, obviously it's gonna keep all the big ice from getting in. But this spring is also gonna help a lot of the medium-sized ice, and it allows you to get a nice handle right on the edge. But then I'm also going to double strain it through this finer sieve, which is going to prevent a lot of the really tiny ice chips and the pulp from the lime from getting in, just to make it a little more beautiful and clean. And last but not least, we're going to take our lime wheel and just float it right on top. And let's see if we can get a nice look at that. We have the daiquiri. Everything's okay. We're back. We're back. We're back. All right. So, let's give it a try. It's such a good drink because it's just all about these three things. It's about the rum and the lime, and then how sweet and how tart you want it. So it's very good. Once you get this dialed in, this balance just right, it's just like so clean. So tasty. I've heard some people in the biz say if they're trying to like size up a bar and the bartender and figure out what kind of bar it is, this is what they'll order, and depending on what comes out, they can assess how fine-tuned, how skilled the bartender is, how much they're paying attention to the small details, what they think a daiquiri is. That's good. I will say there's one other option that we can do. If you want to get a little bit more authentic, if we were to go to Cuba right now, and I haven't been, so I don't know, this is all hearsay. But instead of the simple syrup, they're probably going to start you off with just a bar spoon of sugar. And in fact, the old school recipes are going to be way less sweet than your 8 to 4 to 3 daiquiri. So let's give this a whirl. And I'm going to use the Flor de Caña with this one. And what you're going to get is, but will really give you that lime and rum even more strongly. It won't be hidden by any of that sugar. So I'm just going to take a quick... The other thing I like about sometimes using some sugar instead of simple syrup is that it gives just a little bit more texture to the drink. Almost like a little like rawness, a little grittiness to it, which I think could be a really interesting character. And it's not that it's bad, it's just a little bit less refined, a little bit, like I said, a little bit less classy. One of my favorite Brazilian drinks, the caipirinha, you intentionally use some real gritty sugar on that for something that's just like raw and has a totally different character. Look at this one. Here we've got, I'm actually not going to double strain this one in case that there's some sugar remnants that want to make their way in there. I don't want to capture any of it. So first of all, let's take a look at, when I don't double strain, you get a lot more ice chips on that. And then, see that? And just overall, just like a lot less clear in the drink. I'm still gonna garnish it to make it real nice. And what I'm expecting from this one is obviously less sweet and more just a more rummy drink. Wow, it's amazing how much more actually the lime comes through. I was expecting it to be just like all rum. Actually, I feel like by scaling back on the sugar, the lime becomes the increase in strength of the lime is more than the increase in the strength of the rum. All right, not as good. This one's the money. All right, I'm gonna leave you today. I have a short quote. There's this writer at the turn of the 19th century named Joseph Hergesheimer. I think that's how you say his name. He was a novelist and also wrote some travelogues. And in one in particular, the book is called San Cristobal de Havana. He was writing from Havana. This is from 1920, as Prohibition is just taking place up in the United States. He was safely in Cuba. And the quote is as follows. "The moment now had arrived for a daiquiri. It was a delicate compound, but still a revelation, and I was devoutly thankful to be sitting at that hour in the Inglaterra with such a drink. It elevated my contentment to an even higher pitch. And with a detached amusement, I recalled the fact that farther north, Prohibition was formerly in effect." I hope that your cocktail this evening elevates your contentment to an even higher pitch. Thank you for joining me and drinking with me this evening.
It's 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Great to be with you all. Have a fantastic evening. I'll be back tomorrow night for a special Easter edition at 5 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock UTC. I believe my lovely wife will be joining me, and we're going to be having one of her favorite cocktails. Cheers.